This band has serious history and a brand new comeback album. And the way they recorded the album is exactly the kind of thing I love to dig into. Today's video is an interview with the band Spymob, and they made their comeback album themselves. Self-produced, collaborating remotely from 2 different cities in 2 different states, all in Logic Pro. This is pro-level musicians making records exactly the way that you do, in the same exact software. In fact, the band told me that they use this channel to help them do it. But again, this band has history. I mean, Pharrell Williams was such a fan, he signed the band to his record label, and they performed, toured, and recorded with N.E.R.D. But what makes this record, this band, and this interview so special is craft. I mean, the lead vocal for the latest single was recorded on an SM58 in a basement, and it still made the final cut. It's about taste, not the gear. And the band is being so generous to allow me to give away stems of their latest single, Forever in Time, out now. You can download them, remix them, learn from them, make something new out of them. Links in the description below. Let's dig into it. Brent, Eric, John, I am so pumped to have you here today. Thanks for stopping by Why Logic Pro Rules.
Thanks
for having you.
Thanks for having us.
And so you guys have an upcoming album. It's the first album, I believe, in a lengthy hiatus, right?
Yes. 20 plus years, you guys, I think it's been. Yeah. We did release Memphis in the meantime, but we actually had recorded that several years before. So yeah, it's been a long time.
Awesome. And so you have this album coming out later in the year. Over the last couple of months, you've been dropping a few singles along the way. And today you're dropping the 3rd single, I believe, Forever in Time. And that's the project and song we're going to examine in this interview as well. So for those who are unfamiliar with Spymob, can you tell us, can you each tell me what you do in the band and also explain what kind of genre or style is most apt at this point in time for the band?
There's a lot of R&B influence in John's writing and in our playing and our arranging. But it really varies. And I think it's because John, as a writer, is so wide-ranging stylistically that it really comes down to what does the song seem to want. We really take each project song by song, and then it's only after the songs have been collected that we have a sense of what the album is. We don't, I think it's fair to say, go into any album and say this is what we want it to be. It's a real sort of song. I think it's always been a very song by song process.
Got it. And for those, again, unfamiliar, what do you each play or do in the band Spymob?
Since I was talking, I'll just say I'm the drummer.
Yeah. And I'm the guitarist. And I am the singer and keyboard player.
Awesome. So this is like such a awesome opportunity because you guys have had quite a journey as a band. And again, for those unfamiliar, I just want to set the table for a lot of folks because you started as a band and then quickly things shifted. That was my impression. And you got to have a lot of fun, not just as Spymob, but with others. So how did the band form and what was the early vision for the band?
John, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, John, do you want to? Sure. We formed, the 3 of us came together in 93. And the vision was just to form a band that was making music that we were into. We wanted to be successful in our hometown, Minneapolis, and take it further. But we were always, in hindsight, we were really kind of on our own channel. We weren't very congruent with what was happening in Minneapolis. We were just kind of doing our own thing. But the goal was just to make music that we liked and hopefully other people liked.
Awesome.
Something that was kind of key from the start, Chris, for us was, like John mentioned, we kind of were on our own channel, and we just really had we definitely wanted to be a successful band, but we were very much like, we want to make the music that we want to make. So our goal was always trying to like keep something that felt very authentic to us, but also, we did still want to have, we wanted some commercial success because we wanted to just play music full time, but we definitely didn't want to ever give up the kind of do the sellout thing. We've always kind of just kept our own path and, crossed our fingers that people would like it.
Yeah, I think Brent and I, John and I met in college. We were roommates by chance. And we formed a musical bond early on and had a band in college. And it was only a year after college that we started talking about having a band, and we auditioned like 25 guitarists before Brent fell out of the sky into our labs, and we were thrilled. But I think the thing that has always driven this band and the vision for it, even from the beginning, is just our, not to put you too much on the spot here, John, but our love of John's writing. Mm-hmm. And we never really, we did some experimenting with more collaborative writing from scratch. But what really this band has always been about is John's songs. And Brent and I and others who have been in the band or supported the band along the way have just been such fans of John's writing that has really driven the creative process of the band, and it's taken us stylistically in a lot of different places, and we just always crossed our fingers that there would be enough fans at the grassroots level and enough support from music industry folks to propel us financially. But financial prosperity could never have been the primary driver, and never was.
I think a lot of folks can appreciate and empathize with that journey, because we all just want to make music that feels right to us. And while commercial success is nice, something that many aspire to, it's not the driving force necessarily. It's like that connection through music. Mm-hmm. But for you guys, for Spymob in particular, you kind of like leaped into the next stage, but in a very or at least my understanding is in a unique way. And so I was hoping you guys could describe a little your connection with Pharrell and N.E.R.D and how that happened.
Mm-hmm. So we had been working really hard throughout the 90s, making lots of music, releasing a few records, and finally got the attention of music industry folks, had a couple of really great attorneys, and ended up signing with Epic Records. And there was a lot of anticipation for our album within pockets of Epic, but then there were also skeptics at Epic because we didn't fit in neatly into any genre. So folks in the marketing department were a bit nervous. And we made this album that we loved, that our A&R people loved, that the head of A&R loved, but we ended up getting dropped. And so that felt like a really big defeat. We continued to make music. We very much stayed a band, and were trying to continue to get attention. But one day I got a call from our attorney, Tim Mandelbaum, who by chance also represented this up-and-coming hip-hop production star, Pharrell Williams, and Chad Hugo of the Neptunes. And the head of Epic at the time had invited Tim and Pharrell to come over to her office to see if they might do business. Maybe Pharrell would get an imprint under Epic. So they were there to just talk about possible ways they might work together. Tim had no idea, though, that Pharrell had heard of us, and we were, in fact, at the time, Pharrell's favorite up-and-coming band. And Pharrell went into this meeting under the impression that he got to tell Polly, which he did. Polly, I'm excited about what Epic is doing. And Polly said, oh, really, Pharrell? What are we doing that you like so much? And Pharrell said, well, my favorite band is on Epic. And she said, who is that? And he said, well, Spymob, of course. Now, Polly Anthony had just dropped Spymob a couple of months prior to that. And Polly thought that Tim put Pharrell up to saying that to make Polly feel bad for dropping us. So Polly looks at Tim, and Tim's like, I didn't know that Pharrell knew who Spymob was. And Pharrell said, what's going on here? And Polly said, well, Pharrell, I'm sorry, but we had to drop Epic. And so after that meeting, after that meeting, Tim called me and said, well, you'll never guess who a big fan of yours is. And I said, who? And he said, Pharrell Williams. And then so shortly after that, I called Pharrell, and Pharrell said, I'm such a big fan. I heard you were dropped. We want to make sure that you guys get support. And the band flew me out to New York to meet with Pharrell. And that was really the beginning of the next several years. And shortly thereafter, Pharrell asked John to come out and sing on an album Khalees was making at the time, song backup on Mr. UFO Man, one of Khalees' songs. And then the N.E.R.D. album was presented to us as an idea from Pharrell in a couple months later. So
crazy.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's such a, it's such like a, like deflated and then like couldn't be cooler.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that happens when you just stick with it. You believe in what you do, you work hard at it, you hone your craft. And then these things, you can't predict them, you can't plan them, but you just got to be around for when they happen.
Right. Around long enough for serendipity to get involved.
That's right.
Awesome. And so, but you guys didn't just, you connected with Pharrell, did some recording with him and artists he was working with, but you also toured with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe that a little?
Yeah. So once the In Search of record was done, then we started rehearsals and, got ready to play some shows, and we then toured for, I think it was what you guys, like almost 3 years, 4 years, maybe.
Into 2000, like between 2002 and 2005.
Mm-hmm. It was really fun. It was like very rock and roll kind of, because everybody was pretty fresh and new to it, so it felt, very, very rock and roll. We're just learning as we're going, and it was really raw and organic, but it was super fun and a lot of work, working samples into the set and stuff like that, which was early on, which is definitely a lot more difficult, but it was a great time. Yeah. So recorded the album and then toured the album and worked on those arrangements for live and went out for a few years.
I think one thing that was really satisfying, I think I can speak for all of us, is that even though we were definitely the backing band on the album and we weren't N.E.R.D. itself, which are Pharrell, Chad, and Shay. But as the backing band, for those guys gave us a lot of latitude we had a lot more experience performing live. And so they really sort of handed music direction over to us in terms of shaping the set, determining what backing tracks we may or may not incorporate into the set. So there was always, at least for me, a sense of ownership in the music, even though, it wasn't our project.
Totally. I'm just trying to imagine myself like in that scenario and being like, holy crap. It seems like a dream in some ways, but from that experience of touring and connecting with these artists at a professional level, like how did that experience shape your own creative work from then on? Like, did it feel like you were in the machinations of the industry, or did it feel like you had mentioned that everyone like was kind of growing up together in that moment? How did that inform you as a creative from then on?
I could say everybody might have their own thing, but I could say like I thought it was really fun to be a band like we were, like more on the rock edge, and live instrumentation, and then to move that into the N.E.R.D world, which, then Pharrell and Chad would completely compose the tracks with MIDI instruments, and then we would go in and layer over top of them. And there was a lot to learn. I felt like I learned a lot, like kind of seeing how those two different worlds kind of approached like building sections, and you know what I mean? Like with us, like if you want a section to get really big, like kind of you default go to the ride cymbal and you're throwing a tempo in, you kind of have your standard like kind of pop tricks that you do, or rock tricks that you do. And it was really fun to go into that world and record with Pharrell and Chad, where you kind of learn these different approaches they would take to build sections or to, break down sections. It was just, that's something that I felt like I really took out of that. They have a much more simple approach than, like we're stacked with tracks, as we'll see, a Pharrell and Chad track. I mean, I rarely see a Pharrell track with over 15 tracks in it. Like they're very minimal. So it was really a fun process to kind of learn how to have your instrument work into that world, a little bit differently.
Cool.
And also, Spymob historically, and I think still, we're a pretty meticulous band in terms of, having things be just so. Working with N.E.R.D when we recorded the live instruments for In Search Of, it was blazing fast. Like we would do 1, 2, 3, 4 takes of a thing, and then we'd just be moving on. And that was new and really refreshing. It was really great, and a great learning process about, in some ways stylistically, it made sense for us to be more meticulous with the music we were making as Spymob. And with N.E.R.D, I think as producers, Pharrell and Chad, I think, do a good job up front choosing who they're going to work with, and then just letting them do their thing and getting the inspiration in the first few takes and then moving on. And they really just don't over labor anything.
Yeah, there's a lightness to how they work. They're not perfectionistic. They keep things rolling. And I think that was really influential on us, because we tend to be more slow and maybe at times overthink things, and they just were completely action oriented.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of not your stereotype of how you think of record producers. I mean, they were just like, let's move. And it produced a lot of really good music.
Awesome. And after years away from writing together, what brings you back? Like, what brings you back to this album that you're releasing and releasing singles for?
Well, okay, so that started in a text thread. Guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but a text thread, and we've always kept up over the years and jokes back and forth or whatever,
as friends, not as musical collaborators.
Yeah, and just came up. I can't remember who brought it up, but it's like, hey, maybe it might be fun to try to record a song.
Well, there's like the 20th anniversary of the release of Sitting Around Keeping Score. We're like, maybe we'll do a song, or maybe we'll do 2 songs.
Yeah. And so we started with one. I can't quite remember how it all happened there, but I feel like we started with one and it felt so good. And I can't remember where we eventually, I don't know, maybe tried a couple and we were like, man, let's make an album.
Well, yeah. And I was probably the most skeptical, not excited at first, because I just was not, this felt like trying to recreate ancient history. And I was not, I felt like I'm not in the mode of writing songs right now, and it's not going to go anywhere unless we have good songs. But these guys were so excited. I was like, okay, let's do it. And then, I just think the musical chemistry, even just talking about making music, just kind of it just spurred it on.
Yeah,
And
and
then also-
John's been a songwriting
machine.
ever since, and
Yeah.
and just the songs just keep coming. And like as always, it was the songs, and since the songs were there, we were like, you know, there was a sort of sense in me that like I have to do this, and it's a different phase in our lives now. So our families have to come first, and our day jobs have to come first. But then and our core relationships. But it turns out there's still a lot of time left over to make music.
Mm-hmm.
Understood.
And-
I definitely have those. I definitely have those projects. Just to interject quickly, that I'm like, I don't want to touch that ever again. I live that life. I'm a totally different person, but it's really cool to hear how like the enthusiasm and just like the friendship kind of pulled it back together in an organic way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt very, very organic. And then it felt like a tsunami of fun.
Yeah.
and like all these old feelings of, when Brent comes up with a guitar part, and John comes up with another great song, and then that welling up of creative inspiration that I think we've all had, to a certain extent in other creative arenas. We've all done a lot of collaborating outside of the band, but there's just something extra rare about this chemistry. And it's, as having collaborated so much, I know how rare and special it is.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've already established that Spymob is indie rock, for lack of a better term. But how would you describe this album that's coming out? And like Brent, you have dropped the term yacht rock to me a couple of times, and frankly, I had to look it up because I don't know, I grew up in a different creative journey, so I had no clue what that meant. But for this particular album, what sensibilities or style do you think it is?
Well, I think I dropped that term yacht rock. I would hate to like completely pigeonhole us in yacht rock, but like we definitely, we were big fans of what is considered yacht rock now. And I think I dropped it because like that's kind of become a popular term with the movie that came out about it and whatnot recently.
Sure.
So when I listen to old Spymob, it sounds so rock to me. Like I'm like, I forget how intense like the guitars or the drums sound. And this is much more like a term we've sometimes used is like classic pop, kind of like hearkening back to 60s and 70s, like Burt Bacharach, things like that. Brian Wilson, things like that. And in addition to the influence that people often hear, Steely Dan, they're a huge influence on ours, but it's, and singer-songwriter stuff from that era, hopefully sounds kind of updated, but it's kind of to me, it's sort of like a 20th century pop, classic pop sound. That's where my ears go.
That works for me.
Yes,
I would agree wholeheartedly. So beyond that, we're going to dig into the project that you guys sent along, which is amazing. I feel like so many folks are going to be into seeing the inner workings of a band that's worked at a professional level and done the whole thing and what goes into a production at this time with Logic Pro. But you did outsource or hire to mix the album. And I was curious, what was the thinking behind that?
Well, Eric and I, do all the production and stuff. And we come up with honestly some pretty good like mixes in that Logic mastering little plug. It's really amazing to, add a little extra spice on it. But for me personally, like I feel like I need to kind of let things go. There's that extra little bit that needs to happen in the mixing realm. And I kind of need to creatively let somebody else help me go that extra little bit that I'm hearing in my head. Otherwise I feel like Eric and I could have like maybe mixed it, but that's kind of my thing. And I knew it could go that extra mile. And to be honest, I feel like he really took it like many extra miles, in my opinion. When Eric and I feel like felt like when we gave him the files, we're like, oh yeah, our rough mixes sound really good, and they're a great direction, and they'll be a little bit better. And yeah, it's like he just took it, and he did a great job.
Yeah, I like to think that we know what our strengths are and what our strengths aren't. And, I think we came up with some, fun, rough mixes, to give us a sense and to give Eric Rossi a sense of where we wanted to go. But we're not professional mixers. and we create arrangements that at times, verge on. I'm very aware they can be very dense, if not too dense. And they require someone who knows how to create that space between elements, that perceived space, so it just doesn't feel, problematically cacophonous. And Eric was awesome.
And now we're going to explore the project that you guys sent along and just dig into, like, again, the inner workings of, like, what goes into a production in this day and age for a band who, in my impression from talking to you guys, like, you wrote music together as a band in a room, and now you span 2 different states and you're collaborating remotely. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I would like to play a little bit of the chorus for the audience to be able to hear and get a sense of the band.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
He is on the phone, don't bother, she's alone. He lets out a moan, can't get a decent tone. He is on the phone, don't bother, she's alone. He lets out a moan, can't get a decent tone. I want you.
I think it's very evident there's a lot of careful sonic shaping of this song and every other song on the album. And so I wanted to dive into specific aspects of the song. For example, looking right here, we have drums, and it's provided by Software Drums in Logic Pro. It's using the drum kit designer, using the Pawn Shop Punch and, different elements, but using a software drum kit. And Eric, I was hoping you could speak to the fact that you're using software drums programmed in a song where you are the drummer.
Right. Yeah. Well, so Forever in Time, I believe, was the first song that was that we had scratch tracks for, and we were still in this zone of asking ourselves, do we do what we always do, which is find a studio, record drums. I've done I've spent a lot of my musical career recording drums, editing drums. It's a normal part of what we normally do. But John was writing lots and lots of songs, and it became clear that this was going to be an album. And there's a big, we've always put a premium on recording real instruments, and we love our instruments. I love my vintage drums, and here's evidence that I am a drummer. But it posed what we felt was a serious hurdle to productivity and cost for me to record drums, especially piecemeal. So regardless of whether we recorded drums or not, I knew that I was going to need to do some programming. And I've done a lot of drum programming over the years. But this song actually started with a drum sample that I created for a project actually that Brent and I did for Splice, where we were creating samples for Splice. And so just as a placeholder, I put in this groove. It's the same groove but that I performed live. It's like an 8-bar groove. And then I would cut up that sample to create some variation. And that lived in this song for a few months of the production. But as we added elements of the arrangement it became clear to me that the ambience in the room of that drum recording was interfering with the detail of the other elements. And it became sort of harsh on my ears. So I took it upon myself. I can't remember if I told Brent or John that I was going to do it.
Yeah.
And I just replaced that live sample of me playing. I just thought I'd test drive, what are the drums in Logic capable of? And I found that just approaching the drum track, I would literally, when I was programming, I would literally air drum. Like, where would I put a fill? Where would I put a little variation in the hi-hat? Where would I put in the ghost note? And I tried to create as real a track with Logic as I could. And then Logic gives us the tools of, dynamics control and velocity, and we can shift the feel around. And I found a swing that in general I really liked, but then I have imposed some humanizing qualities on that swing. And then it just stuck. And it provided, by that time I had started programming drums for some of the other songs. And is there something that is lost? Sure. In the process. We still think about recording live drums again at some point. But what is gained is so much speed in the production process. And again, this band isn't about showing off our technical abilities. It's about really making the most of the songs. And then,
can I interject something?
Yeah.
And we all have kind of like different memories of, just aspects of it. But what I recall is that you were doing the Logic drums, but we were kind of thinking, okay, this is sort of maybe like we're demoing it. Maybe this is temporary.
Right.
But it was clear that it sounded so good that there was no reason to fix it, unless we had a drummer who had sort of a drummer ego who needed to track the real drums, which we don't. You're very secure in your drumming. So we were just like, wow, this is so fast and efficient, and we don't have to pay for a room to record drums. What? There's no reason to fix this.
Yeah, and Logic, it just so happens, Logic's drum library has its limitations, as any library does, and it doesn't purport to have the greatest, studio drum options out there. But it just so happens that the options that they do have are really in line with the drums that I've always recorded with. Like their muted brass is like a Ludwig superphonic with some muting on it that I just love. And like the overall drum set that is my go-to and is represented here a bit is, which one is it? It's the Bluebird. And it really has all these great old Ludwig-like vintage drums. And then the kick drum on this song is the Pawn-Shop Punch, I think.
Yep.
So yeah, it just so happens that Logic just delivered unto us basically elements of the kinds of drums I would have normally used.
And then to add to that, Chris, too, is Eric and I had the conversation too when we're trying, because obviously it's fun. We're definitely more like, let's record real instruments, guys, but it was like, we have to, when we did this in the past, we were all in a room together, John brings in the songs, sometimes with charts, sometimes with audio, go, hey guys, I got a new song. And our traditional way of doing it was we'd all just sit there and go, okay, cool. Let's try some, different drum beats and different parts, and we arrange it together in the room. So by the time we get into the studio, by the time we went into the studio for the album Sitting Around Keeping Score, that was our major label record in 99, like those arrangements were down. Like we had those arrangements down. We knew what we were going to play in the studio. But now we had this approach where it's the same situation. John sends us, we got lots of recordings of John sending us sets up his phone and says, hey guys, I got a new song, and, plays the song down. But now we have to arrange it, and we might have changes, but if we went into studio and recorded real drums and then decided to change the arrangement, obviously nowadays we can manipulate much easier than we used to be able to in the past, but this just worked great for us. Like
it's so great to be able to then change the drums once the arrangement comes together. And even in the mix, it was really helpful to have all that isolation in the program drums. Our mix engineer, Eric Rossi, suggested in this song moving the hi-hat in what I felt was sort of unnaturally far to the right. And at first my drummerly ear was like, that's breaking the rules. We can't move the hi-hat. But it opened up all this space in the middle for John's vocal. It was totally the right move.
Mm-hmm.
So some reconceptualizing and just allowing the drums to be different.
Absolutely. So what I'm sort of hearing is not sort of what I'm hearing from you guys is you're a band, you're used to playing, you play your own instruments, but as a function of just like the quality you were aiming for, and also a function of the songwriting and the arranging, this just was more helpful and it sounded great. So there was no needing, it didn't feel necessary to be precious, I guess, about the instruments necessarily. And on the other side of that coin is I want to bring attention to the bass guitar because it's kind of the opposite of that. I just have to locate it. So right there, the bass guitar was recorded, but you did also program it, right? Like if we I just want to take a quick listen to what the bass sounds like as is. It sounds amazing. So, could you expand on that?
But pretty much all of these, when they start, Eric got in on the front end of these the majority of time, honestly. And when you're arranging and programming, like the drums, obviously, because Eric's a drummer. Actually, Eric, you should probably speak to this because I'd imagine the foundation.
In general, yeah. Like I'll put in a placeholder bass part, and sometimes it sticks mostly as is, and sometimes there's a lot of variation. We had the great fortune of having Sean Hurley play bass on this and several other songs on the album. Brent has known Sean from collaborations they've worked on. And so getting my bass line ideas into Sean's hands on these songs that we've done is like taking it to a whole other level, because Sean is not only a fantastic technician, but just has an incredibly musical ear. And so it's always been a joy to get Sean's 5 or 6 takes that he sends us, 5 or 6 complete takes, some of which are really true to whatever MIDI bass we send him. And then as he does more takes, he takes more liberties. And it just feels like, opening a big bunch of presents with each new take. And then we just get to pick and choose. And there's some really incredible moments that Sean brought on the bass to this song that we had never even thought of.
But, and Chris, just like going back to this kind of relates to going back to the rehearsal room when we're sitting in there, and this is just our way of doing that, not being together, So Eric, when he presents this, he's presenting all these tracks, and there's synths and all kinds of stuff, and we just going back and forth. So as opposed to being in a room going back and forth, now we're just doing it on Logic, and then we can, I could try ideas and send it back to Eric, and there's kind of a system we work in, and we'll kind of track. I think it's called track stacks, right, Chris?
Right, absolutely. Yep.
You could probably see it in there in the comp, even there. Like you can see there's track stacks in there, and we kind of go back and forth, and we just try things. And I might record something, and Eric will make a modification and go, "Hey, Brent, I think it should be like that." Or, "Oh, great, that sounds awesome." So that's kind of our.
I think this song had like 68 session alternatives.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
yeah, anytime. So, we work. Is it okay if we move into sort of process?
Absolutely.
Can
yeah.
I want to just
John.
clarify. I want to clarify something that because we introduced Eric as the drummer, but Eric is doing a ton of arranging. He plays as much keyboards on this record as I do, or more. So it's just so that's clear, because you would be sending Sean like ideas of what you conceptualize the bass to do. So you're not just doing drum stuff.
Right. True.
Yes.
True.
Cool. I appreciate that clarification. Yeah. Don't want to pigeonhole someone who's had a significant influence over the album. So that kind of brings me to my next question, which is like, how are you guys writing and arranging? Like, is one person doing most of the songwriting and pitching it, or is it everybody's throwing stuff into the fray? And how are you negotiating that from two different states?
Well, John, as always, is the songwriter, and it's not like it would be against Spymob's rules for Brent and I to write. We're just generally not writing. At least not in the realm that we feel is appropriate for this band. So John writes, and John from the very beginning will take a video on his phone of the song, and he sends it to Brent and to me. And then we have this big folder, and Dropbox is our go-to for where everything lives. We've got this big Dropbox folder with dozens of songs now, and we'll pick one that one of us is inspired by and start working on it. Then once the session is created, it's created in Dropbox. It's synced to Brent, and I are doing the production of all this, the production and arranging. So Dropbox is synced to folders on our computers. We can't be in a session at the same time, which is rarely a problem. But then it's just about doing work, saving it as a session alternative, project alternative, and then handing it off to Brent. And as a band, we talk multiple times a week via text. We've got a weekly band meeting. And then between those meetings, Brent and I will be talking about arranging ideas and saying, well, I tried this, it didn't really work. What do you think? And we're just always bouncing back and forth. Dropbox isn't a glitch-free solution. I'm not sure how much of this you want to include.
No, that's great. Just sorry to interject, but this is like so many people ask questions about like how to remotely engage with a Logic project and how to manage it, because it's not native to Logic at this moment in iCloud. So this is great.
Yeah.
Can I interject something?
Yeah.
Just big picture, part of my skepticism initially was we had always had this very organic collaboration of working a song together in a room. And I just couldn't even picture how would we do this with Brent in California. And what it became was almost like an old school pop production line, like at Motown, like, okay, the writers are done, or the lyricists are done, hand it to this person, where I would, record keys and vocals at Eric's house. And then Eric did most of the arranging. And I actually did far less arranging than I did in the old days. But it would really be kind of handed to you guys. And you guys, Eric would take a crack at it first, and then Brent. And I was in there with big picture stuff, but we kind of developed, it was just much more of this division of labor because we were in different places.
Yeah. So John goes in and he, when we decide on, like, it usually happens like, oh, maybe we should, track these next 3 tunes. John will have a batch of 6 new ones or something. And we go, wow, we're really excited about these 3. And John goes to Eric's house, and Eric puts up the microphone, grabs the MIDI, and that's our basis. We have the basic MIDI and a track. And Sometimes there's maybe some doubles from John or whatever, but it's pretty basic. It's pretty basic.
Pretty basic. In the beginning, we would really treat, when we first started doing this, we would really treat that, John coming to my place, putting down these scratch tracks. We'd really treat them as scratch tracks where like John would do one vocal take. But that one vocal take or the vibe he did in that very, this is the truism that we all know, that one vocal take had a vibe to it. That when John would come back later and then do the real vocal takes and do 5 or 7, it often didn't have the freshness and the storytelling feel of the original. So then we learned that I needed to have John do, a bunch of takes in that first time working through it. So we've been refining our process over time, but learning a lot about how to do this essentially remote project. And we're able to work really fast and efficiently. It does not feel to me at all like a compromise.
No, it's just a different way of working.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing to hear. Again, because a lot of folks, because Apple hasn't developed like a native solution quite yet, a lot of folks feel tripped up by it. And I really appreciate just like the being meticulous about like how we're saving projects and how we're managing alternatives and how we're communicating about it.
Yeah.
And I want to dive into some other aspects of the project because Brent, man, like you're a guitarist. That's like the thing you're known for. And and what I guess I'm trying to hone in on for a lot of folks is like there are instances of software instruments that come with Logic and third party as well. But there's like Alchemy, there's Drum Kit Designer, there's the ES2. And yet these are side by side with like real recordings of bass, of guitar. So I'm just going to play a hair of the verse guitar soloed just for folks to hear.
Okay.
And those sound awesome. And I like that you're using some UA stuff, but you're not completely ignoring what comes in Logic and you're not completely beholden to it either. You're using and doing and recording what's right for the song. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. On this approach. So this one I did, right? Like, so there's the plugins over there. There's the UA. What did I use? Like the deluxe, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it is. And I typically record real amps. Like if I'm going to record, the first thing I'm going to do is go with real amps. I don't know, maybe my age or whatever, but I just prefer real amps. But I think I may have recorded this part with an amp and I just felt like I needed that kind of deluxe sound. There's kind of that just harkens back to an era a little bit. And I like I said, I usually rent one, but I didn't have it. And I think this was fairly new, the deluxe plugin, and I just tried it. They do work. I can make a plugin work typically, but what I usually have to do is just add a little bit afterwards to kind of bring back some of the stuff I missed from my analog outboard gear is typically what happens. And then because I usually, when I'm tracking with a really nice mic pre. I love my distressors. They kind of impart a sound. I think there's a distressor plug on there. Yeah, there's an Empirical Labs plug. Yeah. So I'll do the little things to like what are these little kind of percentage tricks? Because the plugins get extremely close these days. They get really, really close, but there's just a little bit in there that's missing, and it's a little bit of that analog thing that happens. So I look for plugins that'll do that. The Empirical Labs brings a little sound that it has a sound, or the Pultec. I notice like even just little bits of use, adding a little bit with a Pultec, it just has a thing that's familiar to your ear. So that's kind of how these guitars came about.
Awesome. And you're not one to be afraid of the DI guitar either.
No, I love DI guitar.
I think that's a fascinating thing.
Yeah. Doobie Brothers, man. Long train running.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And a quick clarifying note just for the audience, because I mean, at this point in time, you can save Logic as a pack or a project as a package and upload it to iCloud, and it'll sync between iPad and Mac. But there's always those snafus when it comes to, creative work, heavy lifted work that lives in the cloud. And hearing your workflow with Dropbox, I think is helpful to folks to know, like, oh, it is possible. You just got to be meticulous and careful and considerate about it.
Yeah.
To answer that question again, Chris, the like, what is the surprise? In a way, I think, one of the biggest, we have the message of our music that we want to get out there, but there's this other component of that, a message that you do want to send to folks out there that there's so many reasons not to make art. There's so many reasons not to make music. And some of the reasons people give themselves are internal. I'm not good enough. What's the point? Comparing to others. And then some of them are external, technical challenges or just time. And I think the great surprise was, as Brent alluded to, like, that technically this works. And that's, time and being able to make music efficiently enough has always been our barriers. We didn't break up in 2005. We didn't stop making music because we didn't like making music with each other. We stopped making music because our families were growing and financially it just wasn't making sense. And then we just kind of, faded into the, what happened to Spymob world. And it really took this long for time and technology to allow us in, living across the country from each other, or John and I live across the Twin Cities from each other, to just make it possible. And so once it became possible, then we could make music again.
That's beautiful. I feel like that speaks to so many folks, because I hear from a lot of Logic users who are at these stages in their life, not necessarily our age, but at different stages of life where they feel they're empowered now because of the tech, because of the software that they can create, whether it's with others, whether it's by themselves. So that's amazing to hear. I really want. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say too, Chris, and something that Eric and I talked about, and we tried to stay in sync with is like even plugins, and using Logic was strategic for us. That Logic is such a creative platform, like we got all of these instruments, and you'll notice on this Forever in Time, which is an earlier one, there's a lot more like alchemy synths and things like that. Eventually we added some Arturia, and we have a song that heavily uses Arturia, and a lot of Arturia in the project. But Eric and I wanted to try to get a platform that had a lot of creative options for us. And then if we have to do anything where where it's outside of Logic, we would try to stay in sync there. So one other thing we did was just grab the UAD Spark a subscription, because then so we don't use a ton of, like, we're not like plugin, grabbing all these different plugins and stuff like that. We purposely try to make it very in sync with each other. So when I pull up the session, there's not a bunch of big surprises, or Eric, we just have a nice, good creative flow, So that was really important. So that's how we've worked with this.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So one other aspect of the project that I feel like so many people are going to be pumped on is the vocals, and specifically how the vocals were recorded. So I would like to play maybe like the second verse for a second.
Okay.
Here we go.
Want you, know it. Write a long letter and fold it.
I love those vocals, and besides like everyone, myself included, are going to be like, oh, okay, like what is he doing on the plugins? But could you explain how you track the vocals and the environment, the signal chain, the whole thing?
Well, this one was recorded truly thinking it was a scratch vocal, and I wasn't there for the recording. It was recorded at another place, but it was a 58, and I think going through a UI converter of some kind, and it was one take. We had one take, and we always intended, from a process standpoint, oh yeah, we'll record it for real at some point. But we just fell in love with this one take. And so that's what we had. We had one take. There's not a fancy story for you, Chris.
No, but that's the point here. So you're saying you track the vocals with a Shure SM58.
Yep.
And in a domestic environment, right? Like not in a studio or anything.
In a downstairs basement.
And Brent, correct me if I'm wrong. You said maybe it was like a Symphony Desktop from Apogee.
No, I think this was just a Universal Audio, like one of those little
UA. You're right.
UA
okay.
Something inexpensive. Yeah. Not even a twin. I don't think. I think it was like,
awesome.
And it just worked.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. And I'm not trying to just like, I'm not trying to pander to you guys, but it's like it genuinely sounds good. And the reason I want to point it out is because like across the scope of the project, there's software drums when necessary, but then there's like a great bass performance or guitar performances recorded when necessary. And then there's one vocal take recorded with a 58 in a basement.
Yeah.
That makes the record. And I think it really speaks to like it doesn't matter what you have. It's just like a matter of taste and a matter of care. Right.
Right. And knowing, and this is a constant conversation in the band, knowing when the right decision is to go and do more takes and to get a different thing, and then knowing when you got the special thing already. And there's not an absolute right or wrong with either, but it's a constant assessment of, do we already have the spark, or is the spark yet to be found? And most of the time we agree, but sometimes we disagree about whether the spark is there or not. And then it's just an ongoing conversation. But it just became clear as the song formed around and was arranged around the energy of John's vocal, that it wouldn't make any sense to try to get a better take when the whole song is built around that energetic storytelling.
Right. I think that's something I can learn from, because I have an album I've been sitting on for like almost 8 years because I've been so perfectiony about it. And exactly that is like knowing when you have good enough, when you need to push it a little more. These are really crucial decisions.
Yeah.
In creative work. What's the thing you thought you needed to make a great record? This is probably like this is such a rhetorical question, but what's the thing you thought you needed to make a great record that you since realized maybe you didn't?
I thought we needed to be physically together.
Yeah, I didn't know. I was pretty confident, but like I love hearing Eric record drums. I love standing next. There's nothing like that. Like, so that was definitely, a question. But I personally, I knew, and I wanted to, I had a personal challenge for myself, because I knew that if I ever got a band back, because it'd been like 20 years I'd done all this work with Pharrell and whatnot since that time, but like I didn't have a band of my own, but I'd always thought if I got a band of my band back, could I take it to what I hear in my head, like this level,
Right.
So that was a challenge for me, and I didn't know if I could do that, like not being physically in the same room with the guys and whatnot, but I can't be more happy with the outcome than I am. It's just, it turned out so great.
Awesome. Cool. I'm humbled, I'm stoked. And also I just want to share with everybody who's watched the interview that you guys have generously provided the stems for Forever in Time in a Logic Pro project that's available for download. It's just a link in the description and it'll take you to an email form. You just type in your name and email and you'll get the stems and project as a download. And what do you want Logic users to take away from Forever in Time?
Well, I think it's just fun to collaborate. Having the stems get out there and seeing what people do. We had like our Memphis album people did remixes for, and it's just really cool. I mean, for me personally, it's like collaborating and meeting other musicians and being excited with other musicians to make music that's a big win for me, just to see what happens with these,
Yeah, that says that Brent speaking for me there too. Just the community of it all is what means the most.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I appreciate that too, because I feel like in this amazing world of creativity that we now have at our fingertips, it also feels like maybe we're all a little siloed as well. So like your story of being able to collaborate with the limitations or the challenges, and now being able to share that with my audience, that's just amazing. So I want to just reinforce that link is in the description below to download Forever in Time, the stems in a Logic Pro project. Also, Forever in Time is now available as a single online, Apple Music, Spotify, I assume all the rest. Are there any links or anywhere you want to point folks, like Instagram, TikTok, anywhere towards the band to connect?
For all those folks who are still downloading digital music, we have their album is available on Bandcamp, and you can come visit our little website at spymob.music. Is that right, Brent?
Spymob.music.
Yeah.
And then we're probably most active on Instagram, but we keep our Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok updated, and trying to stay up on all that stuff. So, but Instagram is typically where we're most active, and
Awesome. Well, I'll include the links down below in the description so folks can check you out on the various music sites and Instagram. You guys will hook me up with that, and I'll hook everybody else up to connect with the band. So thanks, guys, again for taking the time. I really appreciate it. This has been super cool to explore your creative work and the journey it's taken.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chris. And thanks,
Chris.
man. I know from us too, like this is such a honor to get on. We watch the channel. Like we're taking, I definitely have my little links of how I need to clean up a session from Chris, and what I mean?
Yeah, Chris, you played a role in this record. So
you played a role in this record too. So we really appreciate this, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thanks.